Some stories about countries they sound made up, right? Almost like a myth. Well, today we're diving into one of the most incredible transformations, maybe ever. The story of Singapore. Just picture this. On one side, you've got this tiny, swampy island. It's got zero natural resources, and to top it off, it just got kicked out of its own country, left completely on its own. Now, on the other side, one of the richest, most futuristic, and frankly cleanest places on Earth. And the craziest part? This didn't take centuries. It happened in like a single lifetime. All right, let's get into it. This whole journey from a swamp to these incredible skyscrapers. Most people just call it a miracle, right? I mean, it seems to defy all logic. Which, of course, brings us to the big question. How? How on earth did they do it? What was the secret sauce? How do you turn this tiny, vulnerable island into a global powerhouse? Was it just a fluke? Pure luck? Or was there a plan all along? Well, the answer doesn't really start with a miracle. It starts with a plan. A brutally realistic one, actually. And it was all orchestrated by its founding father, a man named Lee Kuan Yew. See, he looked at Singapore and knew it was basically a tiny shrimp in a sea full of sharks. So his first goal wasn't some grand vision of a paradise. Nope, it was just survive. Wow. I mean, that quote tells you everything you need to know about his intensity, right? For him, this wasn't some 9-to-5 political gig. This was life or death. It just perfectly captures that relentless do-or-die attitude you'd need to build a whole country from nothing, especially when you're constantly worried your neighbors might just swallow you whole. So Lee Kuan Yew's very first move was to make that little shrimp poisonous. The thinking here is actually pretty simple, but brilliant. Basically, you make yourself so difficult and painful to attack that nobody in their right mind would even try it. The cost of invading would just be way, way too high. It was a defense strategy that came from having absolutely no other choice. Okay, so a tough military is great for keeping invaders away. But it doesn't put food on the table, right? It doesn't build a future. To really make it on their own, Singapore needed cash. They needed an economy. And here's the problem. They had nothing to sell, no natural resources to export. So, you know what they did? They decided to export the only thing they had, themselves. And this is where the genius really kicks in. It was basically a three-part plan, a masterstroke, really. Step 1, go to war on corruption. Make the system clean, stable, trustworthy. Step 2, slash taxes. Make the place an absolute magnet for businesses. And step 3, roll out the red carpet for anyone wanting to invest from overseas. They literally turned the entire country into the product. And that product was a super safe, incredibly efficient, and highly profitable place to set up shop. But, as you might have guessed, that incredible success story isn't the whole story. Because all of that rapid growth, all of that development, it came with a price tag. And it involved some very specific and pretty major trade-offs. Yeah, this is where things get a little more complicated. You've got the amazing skyscrapers, the super safe streets, the booming economy. That's one side of the coin. But what's on the other side? What did the actual citizens of Singapore have to give up to get all that? It all comes down to this kind of unwritten deal, a social contract. You can see it laid out here. On one hand, you get some amazing things. We're talking safety, stability, serious wealth. But on the other hand, you have to give some things up. You're living in a society with really strict laws. You have fewer personal freedoms, and the government has a lot of control over your life. It's a huge bargain when you think about it. Now, the philosophy that's often used to explain this whole approach is something called Asian values. The basic idea, at least in this case, is that what's good for the group, the community's well-being, its order, its harmony, is more important than the rights of any single individual. It's a pretty different way of looking at things compared to, say, a lot of Western countries. And look, when we say strict laws, we're not just talking about big-time crimes. Oh no, the government's control gets into everyday social stuff in ways that might seem kind of shocking, or honestly, even a little funny to those of us on the outside. Yup, you're saying that right, chewing gum. For decades, it was illegal to bring it in or sell it. And you might be asking, why? Well, people kept sticking their used gum on the automatic doors of the shiny new subway trains, and it was messing them up. So the government solution wasn't, let's clean it more often. It was, let's just ban the stuff entirely.
It's probably the most famous and maybe the simplest example of that big trade-off in action, the community's efficiency over your personal freedom to chew gum.
Okay, so this kind of brings us full circle back to where we started. Now that we've looked at the defense strategy, the economic plan, and this huge social contract, we've got to revisit that whole miracle idea, don't we?
Because when you really peel back all the layers, the story of Singapore starts to look a lot less like some random miracle and a lot more like one of the boldest, most calculated gambles in modern history. It was a detailed blueprint for survival, carried out with ironclad discipline, and it only worked because the people agreed to a very, very demanding deal.
And that really leaves us with one final question to chew on. Is the Singapore model a playbook that other countries should copy? Is it a path to prosperity worth following? Or is the price of all that success, that deal we talked about, something that you personally would just never be willing to accept?